Hi everyone, I hope you're well. So this recording is just to speak to some important content that is in Learning Unit 4. It is still looking at the background information in terms of just helping you understand the theory behind journalism. So what this learning unit is doing is basically pointing out what is considered important in terms of certain aspects or our news values, so that you can understand what to look for and what to actually put in your own work to make it worth reading and make it what we call newsworthy. Okay, so the learning unit does obviously have other pieces of information, but I'm just going to be focusing on our news values and what to look for when you're writing. Okay, so your news values are what we call our guidelines or the criteria that your media outlets need to ensure are present to make a story worth reading. So the reality is that we have hundreds of thousands of pieces of information being distributed on a minute by minute basis, but some stories will stand out and be more important than others to the majority or minority of a society, the world, or a specific place. So when we are deciding whether a story is seen as being of value or newsworthy, we look for these pillars of newsworthiness. Okay, and what we do is we look to the information. Is it necessary information? Is it unusual events? Is it observable facts? Is it unbiased? And is the writer's opinion present, or is it present but they have stipulated that it's an opinion piece? So the more news values that we have, the more a story is deemed to be of importance. So we have these key pillars of newsworthiness that you need to think about when you guys are actually writing your own pieces. So you need to think about these being present in such a way that they add value to the story. So they should never just be present for the sake of being present. There's got to be purpose and reasoning behind the presence of these pillars of newsworthiness. So the first one is novelty, where news is different or unusual and makes people go, ooh, that's weird or different or stands out. So we think about what needs to be present. Give me 1 second, guys. So sorry about that. I was just getting my dogs to stop barking in your ears. So when we have something that's different or unusual, it just means that it stops people in their tracks and makes them want to read on and find out what's going on. The next thing is in terms of importance. So how important is this information to a particular group of people? So for example, is it important to them because it's directly impacting them? Or is it important because, it's the area where they come from? Is it, an earthquake happening overseas is maybe not deemed as important, or if an earthquake was happening here, because it doesn't directly impact us. But at the same time, it's still of importance. So if it's something that's impacting a large group of people, or if it is impacting a particular group of people. So for example, you'll notice that things that happen within the West are deemed more newsworthy because more people show interest. So, we'll know about 5 crazy Americans getting squished within a submarine, but we won't necessarily hear about Syrian refugees being lost at sea on a boat. So it just means we've got to think about what makes a story important to the people that you are writing for. The next one that links to that is interest. The stories have got to actually interest the audience. So it's got to be something people want to talk about, that they want to engage, they want to know about what's going on. So, for example, at the moment with the World Cup, with Rugby World Cup, you know, it's of interest. We are wanting to know what's going on beyond just the traditional interest within sport. It just takes it that one step further. So it's got to be something that people will talk about and want to engage. The next is timing. Old news is not news. Literally, in the word news is the word new. So this is not referring to further developments on a story. What it means is that if an event has taken place, say, a week or two ago and was never covered, that's no longer news. It's no longer relevant, especially in the day and age that we are in, where we get our information 24/7 online, and there is no need for us to read old news. The next one is size. So how many people are being impacted? So the more people a story impacts, the higher the value of that story will be. So if 100,000 people get displaced by a hurricane or an earthquake, it has more significance than an earthquake that displaced 100 people. Or if you live in Durban and have the odd shake or tremor, and next minute everyone's freaking out. But for others around the world, they have proper earthquakes, for example. All right. The next one is, which is important to think about, is proximity. But we have two different types of proximity: physical and emotional. Your physical proximity are the stories that will impact us directly because we are going to come into contact with the news event. So, for example, we would need to know about a flooding in KZN, or we'd need to know about strikes in Joburg. But if you live in Joburg or KZN or whatever it may be, if you're not where that event has taken place, you won't show it that much interest. But if it's where you are, you will then take note and be aware of it. But then you also have your emotional proximity. So while you live in SA or the UK or wherever it may be, you still take an interest in news stories that are happening in other parts of the world because there's someone that lives in that area, or it will have a direct impact on you emotionally. The next one you need to be aware of is familiarity. Obviously, the more famous a person is, the more likely we are to read the story. But it's not only based on fame, it's also based on how often that story is covered. Oh, sorry guys, I did that by mistake. So for example, load shedding. There's a familiarity. We know what was happening with load shedding. We make fun of it all the time, but it's still important. We still need to know what's going on with load shedding. The next is surprise. So I always love using these Daily Sun covers because they're always so way out there and what have you. But it's that OMG factor. So it could be a dog, sails across the ocean with its owner, or it could be something weird and wacky. A whale coming up and saying hello to people on the coast. Whatever it may be, it just makes people go, "Oh my word! Have you read that story? Have you heard about this?" And people discuss it. The next is results. So this is something we'll start seeing quite prominently with the elections coming up next year. But we want to know what is happening in terms of certain results. So we want to know sporting results. We're wanting to know election results. We want to know those stats and those pieces of information so that they can, make informed decisions based on those results. Next is relevance. So how relevant is that story to the reader? If it's going to be very relevant to them, they'll read about it. If it's got nothing to do with them, they will move on and will ignore your story.
I just want to take a time out and show you.
The next is personalities or prominence. So celebrities, that's your typical celebrities, your musicians and all that, but it can also be celebrities as in political leaders or politicians or sporting people. So basically anyone that has some fame to their name, that people know who they are. All right, the next one is power. So that will be the great men that hold significance with great men and women, and those that don't uh, ascribe to traditional gender norms, because obviously we have major shifts within society. So it's anyone that has significance or power or some relevance to society that can actually change the lives of who we are. So, where you'll have prominence in terms of celebrity status with a president, they also have a level of power because they can change the laws, they can change the way things work. You can also have power with a certain company, such as BP or Shell, and oil trades and how much it influences our oil production. Influences our petrol prices and what have you. So it's anyone that actually can change the way in which we see the world. Then bad news and conflict. Okay, we're seeing this a lot with Syria and Russia at the moment, and the reality is there's always some form of bad news or conflict or disagreements or what have you, but we want to know about them, we want to analyze them, we want to break them down, we want to know what's going on. So it is important to see that bad news, that we as society, bad news sells the papers. We don't want just all the airy fairy information. We want to know the actual events, and we want to know when things are going wrong or right within our world. So and it's not only, for example, war, but it can also be disagreements between political leaders or anyone, again, that has some form of power or influence over us. The next is availability. So you'll notice that major centers, developed countries, first world countries, and that will get more airplay and more importance placed on them versus your quieter or smaller countries or states and what have you. Then the next thing is marketability. So there's got to be stories that sell papers or sell subscriptions online, whatever it may be. And then lastly, our human interest. So it's those stories that pull on our heartstrings, make us feel something, and make us actually stop and take note of what's being said. All right. So those are your pillars of newsworthiness. Please think about these when you are starting to write your own pieces. And then we'll start in our next collab to break down and discuss the actual writing of your journalistic pieces. Thanks, everyone.